The earthquake that struck Myanmar has damaged 185 ancient Buddhist pagodas, historical structures in the ancient city of Bagan.
A routine collapse at an ancient Asian temple was supposed to reveal nothing more than broken stone. Instead, it exposed a sealed chamber no one knew existed.
The greatest damage here came when a recent reconstruction at the top came tumbling down, crushing ancient facade as it fell.
Inside were hundreds of scrolls hidden deep within the structure, some so fragile they turned to ash when touched. What little could be studied revealed texts that were not written to teach or inspire. They were written to restrict, to seal, and to stop something from ever being repeated. The collapse that should never have revealed anything. On the outer edge of central Myanmar, within the temple fields of the Bagan Plains, stands an 11th century Buddhist temple built during the pagan kingdom. It is not one of the restored landmarks visited by tourists. It is a minor structure that had been closed for years due to stability concerns. According to regional heritage records, the temple had no active excavation history and was not considered a priority site. After a series of small seismic shifts in the region, part of the temple's interior collapsed. The damage was contained within one section and did not affect the main structure. Local authorities treated the incident as routine. Collapses of this kind are common across Bagan due to age, soil movement, and repeated earthquakes. No special investigation was planned. A restoration crew was assigned to clear debris and secure the damaged area. Their task was simple: remove fallen stone, document visible damage, and prevent further collapse. At this stage, no archaeologists were involved, and no unusual findings were expected. During the cleanup, workers began removing masonry from an inner section of the temple. According to site reports, the stone beneath the rubble did not match the surrounding construction. The blocks were more uniform, the joints were tighter. The layout did not align with the known interior plan of the temple. At first, supervisors assumed it was part of an undocumented repair. As more debris was cleared, the structure became easier to see. It was a sealed interior wall positioned where no wall should have existed. Engineers noted that the surface showed no signs of exposure. There were no soot stains, no smoke marks, and no erosion caused by airflow or moisture. For a space believed to be nearly 1,000 years old, this was unusual. Work was stopped immediately. The restoration supervisor contacted regional engineers, who in turn notified heritage officials. According to internal reports, officials ordered all repairs to halt. The concern was that the wall might be concealing an undocumented structure, and that further disturbance could cause irreversible damage. By the end of the day, access to the site was restricted. Only engineers and a small number of researchers were allowed inside. Guards were posted to keep others away. What had begun as routine conservation was now treated as a controlled investigation. The focus was no longer on repairing damage, but on understanding why a sealed wall existed inside a temple where no such feature had ever been recorded. At this point, no one knew what lay behind the wall. The collapse had revealed its presence, but not its purpose. Physically breaking through it carried the risk of destroying whatever was hidden. According to those involved, the only safe option was to find a way to examine what lay beyond without touching the structure itself, which is what led the team to consider scanning the interior before any further action was taken. The scan that revealed geometry beneath the ruins. With physical access ruled out, the investigation shifted from hands to instruments. Engineers and archaeologists agreed that any attempt to break through the sealed wall could cause irreversible damage. According to internal reports, the decision was made to map the interior using non-invasive methods only. Ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR were brought in to examine what lay beneath the damaged section of the temple without disturbing a single stone. The first scans were routine. Radar pulses returned scattered signals typical of soil, rubble, and fractured rock. At that stage, there was nothing to suggest anything unusual. Then the team widened the scan range and increased depth. Almost immediately, the data changed. According to technicians on site, empty spaces began appearing far below the known floor level of the temple. These voids were too large and too clean to be caused by natural erosion. As scan resolution increased, the shapes became clearer. Straight lines began to form. Right angles appeared where none should exist underground. What initially looked like noise resolved into corridors. These were not rough or uneven. They were clean and sharply defined. Several researchers later reported a moment of silence in the control room as the first full cross-section came into view. One structure stood out more than the rest. Roughly 30 feet below ground, the radar revealed a rectangular chamber with precise dimensions. There were no visible entry points, no connecting tunnels, no collapse paths. It appeared sealed on all sides. Engineers checked for errors and ran the scan again using different frequencies. The chamber remained. To rule out natural explanations, the team brought in AI-assisted modeling software. The system compared the scan data with known geological formations in the region. According to preliminary analysis, the shapes did not match fractures, sinkholes, or lava tubes. The angles were too consistent. The spacing was too deliberate. The conclusion, while cautious, was clear. These were man-made structures. What made the discovery more troubling was what could not be found. No historical documents referenced underground chambers beneath this temple. No restoration notes mentioned substructures. No oral records described hidden rooms. According to heritage officials, there was no known reason for such a complex to exist beneath a minor temple that had never held special status. Speculation began quietly. Some believed the underground design predated the temple itself. Others suggested it was intentionally erased from records. A few locals claimed that elders had warned against digging beneath old temples, though these accounts remain unverified. What was certain was that the scans pointed to an intentional underground system that had been sealed and forgotten. At this stage, the investigation reached a limit. Digital images could show shape and depth, but they could not explain purpose. The data confirmed that something was there, but not what it was used for, or why it had been hidden so completely. According to those involved, understanding the space would require context that only physical observation could provide. At this stage, the investigation stalled. The scans could show shape and depth, but they could not explain what the underground structures were or how they were used. According to the team, answers would only come from seeing the space directly. While reviewing the same section of the temple that had collapsed earlier, engineers noticed a narrow opening created by the collapse itself. It had been blocked by debris and considered unsafe during the initial response. After stabilization work, the opening was now visible and passable. For the first time, the team had a direct path into the space the scans had revealed. The chamber that time, somehow left untouched. When the team finally moved through the narrow opening created by the collapse, they expected the worst. Based on experience with other damaged temples in Bagan, they prepared for loose stone, heavy dust, and signs of long-term decay. According to reports from those present, the first few steps inside were taken slowly, with engineers checking stability at every point. What they found did not match any of those expectations. The chamber beyond the opening was intact. There was no collapsed ceiling, no scattered rubble, and no signs that the space had ever been disturbed. The floor was clear, the walls were solid. Several researchers later said the lack of damage was the first moment they realized this was not a typical interior space. For a structure sealed for centuries, the preservation was unusually complete. The walls were carved directly into the bedrock beneath the temple. Unlike the brickwork above, these surfaces were smooth and evenly cut. Measurements showed consistent alignment across all sides of the chamber. According to architectural specialists, this level of precision was not common in minor pagan-era temples, especially in spaces not meant to be seen. The construction appeared deliberate and carefully planned. One detail stood out immediately. There were no murals, carvings, or religious symbols on the walls. This was unusual for a Buddhist temple, where interior spaces typically include some form of iconography. Here, the walls were plain. Some researchers speculated that the absence of decoration was intentional, meant to avoid drawing attention to the space or its purpose. This interpretation remains unverified. Along the interior, stone platforms and recessed niches were arranged in a balanced pattern. Their placement was symmetrical, with no clear focal point. According to reports, the layout did not resemble a shrine or a meditation hall. It looked functional rather than ceremonial. The design suggested that the space was meant to hold objects, not people. Those objects were still there. Small items rested on the platforms and within the niches, exactly where they had been placed. Nothing was overturned. Nothing was scattered. There were no signs of animals, water intrusion, or human interference. For archaeologists, this raised immediate concern. Such order suggested the chamber had been sealed intentionally and had remained untouched since. At this stage, the team agreed on one thing. This was not a forgotten storage room, and it was not an unfinished space. According to internal assessments, the chamber had been designed to be closed and to stay that way. The question was why, and that question became more pressing as attention shifted from the chamber itself to what it contained, which at first glance seemed ordinary enough to explain everything. The scrolls that first lowered their guard. Once the chamber was confirmed safe to work in, the team began examining the built-in storage spaces cut directly into the chamber walls. These were shallow stone compartments placed at regular intervals along the interior, positioned for easy access rather than concealment. Inside the outer compartments, researchers found wooden and bamboo containers resting neatly against the stone. Their placement was orderly and careful, with no signs of haste, damage, or collapse. When the containers were opened, they revealed palm leaf manuscripts, stacked in tight, organized bundles. According to reports from the site, this discovery immediately changed the mood inside the chamber. Palm leaf manuscripts were the primary writing medium across much of South and Southeast Asia for centuries. During the Pagan Kingdom period, they were used to record everyday information such as religious teachings, administrative records, medical knowledge, legal decisions, calendars, and ritual schedules. They were not symbolic objects or ceremonial items, they were working documents. Their presence usually pointed to routine record-keeping, not secrecy. Initial examination supported that conclusion. The palm leaves were cut to standard sizes known from the period. The binding holes and thread patterns matched established monastic writing practices in early Myanmar. Bamboo containers were a common choice for storage, allowing air circulation while protecting manuscripts from insects and moisture. According to conservation specialists, these materials were designed to be handled, accessed, and reused over time. As documentation progressed, several scrolls were read in part. Preliminary translations revealed content that was largely ordinary. Some texts listed goods and supplies, likely inventory records. Others tracked dates, offerings, and temple activities. A few fragments appeared to be instructional, possibly related to healing practices or daily operations. Nothing suggested warnings, prohibitions, or restricted knowledge. The conservation process continued smoothly. Each scroll was photographed, cataloged, and stabilized using standard procedures. None showed signs of instability. According to those involved, this further reinforced the idea that the chamber functioned as a protected archive rather than a sealed vault. At this stage, some team members believed the earlier concern over the sealed wall and underground layout had been overstated. Reports suggest frustration began to surface. Some researchers felt the discovery was becoming less significant than expected. It was proposed that the chamber had been sealed during a period of unrest and simply forgotten, preserving its contents by accident rather than intention. That explanation began to weaken as cataloging moved deeper into the chamber. To document the collection properly, the team removed and logged the manuscripts layer by layer. Only then did a pattern become clear. The scrolls were not arranged by subject, importance, or date. They were arranged by depth. The most ordinary texts were stored closest to the entrance. Further inside, the storage spaces became deeper and more restricted. The materials in these deeper sections were wrapped more tightly and separated from the outer scrolls by solid stone barriers. Engineers confirmed that several inner compartments were sealed behind stone slabs that showed no signs of collapse or later modification. According to internal assessments, these seals were placed deliberately during construction. This raised a difficult question. In monastic practice, important texts are usually kept accessible, not hidden behind barriers. Here, access became more difficult the deeper one went. The scrolls already examined had shown nothing alarming, yet the layout suggested that some texts had been intentionally set apart. According to some on the team, this was the moment their attention shifted. If the outer scrolls were harmless, then why were others buried deeper and sealed away at all? The scrolls that could not be moved without dying. Once attention shifted to the deeper sections of the chamber, the tone of the investigation changed sharply. Beyond the outer storage spaces, researchers found hundreds of additional scrolls packed tightly together behind stone barriers. These scrolls were not stored in bamboo cases like the others. Instead, they were wrapped in darker fibers and bound with thick layers of organic material. According to conservation specialists, the packaging alone suggested these texts had been treated very differently from the rest. The first attempt to examine one of these scrolls ended badly. When a conservation specialist carefully loosened the outer wrapping, the material reacted almost immediately. According to reports from the site, the scroll surface began to crack as soon as it was exposed to open air. Within seconds, sections of the manuscript collapsed into fine fragments. The ink did not fade. It broke apart, turning into powder before any stabilization could be applied. The team stopped and tried again using different methods. Temperature and humidity controls were adjusted. Airflow was minimized. Even under these conditions, the same thing happened. When lifted, entire layers of scrolls broke down. What had appeared solid only moments earlier collapsed into ash. According to those present, the speed of the decay was shocking. These were not fragile objects slowly breaking down over time. They were reacting to exposure itself. Conservation specialists began examining why this was happening. Preliminary analysis suggested the scrolls had been treated with organic coatings that hardened in sealed conditions but destabilized when exposed to oxygen. Some researchers believe these coatings were intentionally applied. Unverified reports suggest the fibers may have been soaked in plant resins or oils that created a controlled environment as long as the scrolls remained sealed. Once that environment was broken, the material failed. The emotional impact of this loss was immediate. According to internal accounts, team members were visibly shaken as scrolls disintegrated in front of them. These were not ordinary documents. They represented knowledge preserved for centuries and lost in moments. Several researchers reportedly argued to stop all handling immediately. Others expressed anger and frustration, not at the scrolls, but at the realization that every attempt to save them might destroy them instead. At this point, physical removal was halted entirely. Conservation leaders issued instructions that no further scrolls from the deeper sections were to be touched. According to official notes, the risk of total loss was too high. The collapse of the scrolls suggested something far more troubling than poor preservation. The decay did not appear random or accidental. Based on the pattern, some specialists began to suspect deliberate design. These scrolls were not stored to be read later. They were stored to remain sealed. The materials used seemed chosen to ensure that disturbance would result in destruction. According to some interpretations, this may have been a form of protection, not against theft, but against exposure. This realization marked a turning point. If the scrolls could not survive contact with the outside world, then their creators may have never intended them to be recovered. Whatever knowledge they contained was meant to remain hidden, even at the cost of being lost forever. With physical preservation no longer possible, the team faced a decision they had hoped to avoid. They could abandon the deeper scrolls entirely and accept the loss, or they could find a way to study what remained without ever touching the material itself. The tool that finally let us see what we were never meant to read. With physical handling ruled out, the team faced a serious problem. The deeper scrolls could not be moved, opened, or stabilized without destroying them. According to project notes, abandoning them entirely was briefly considered, but doing so would have meant accepting the permanent loss of text that had survived for centuries. Instead, researchers turned to a tool usually reserved for the most damaged manuscripts. This method did not involve opening or touching the scrolls. It relied on scanning the surface of the material using controlled light at different frequencies. The goal was simple: capture any remaining traces of writing without exposing the scrolls to air or pressure. According to conservation specialists, this approach had been used in rare cases where texts were too fragile to handle. The scans revealed something unexpected. Although much of the ink was no longer visible to the eye, faint impressions remained. These were not colors. They were slight changes in the surface where ink had once pressed into the fibers. High-resolution imaging was able to record these marks as shadow patterns. At first, the results looked like noise. Then shapes began to appear. Researchers used computer software to compare these faint patterns across multiple scans. The system did not guess meaning. It looked for repetition. According to reports, certain shapes appeared again and again, always in the same order. This suggested intentional symbols rather than random damage. Some of these symbols did not match known scripts from the region. Linguists were brought in to examine the patterns. Using modeling tools, they tested whether the structure resembled storytelling or instruction. According to preliminary assessments, it did not. The text did not follow the flow of narratives or records. Instead, it appeared segmented and repetitive, closer to ritual language. More concerning was the way the phrases were structured. According to unverified translations, several lines followed the same pattern. They did not describe events. They set limits. They used language that functioned as warnings or restrictions. Some researchers believe the text was designed to prevent action, not guide it. Further analysis suggested the writing was layered. Certain symbols seemed to mask others beneath them. Even when parts of the text were reconstructed, meaning remained incomplete. According to specialists, this may have been intentional. The encoding appeared designed to resist full understanding, even after recovery. For the first time, fragments of the deeper texts could be seen without destroying them. What those fragments revealed was unsettling. The scrolls were not records meant to be preserved or teachings meant to be passed on. They appeared to exist for one purpose only: to forbid something from being done. And once that realization set in, the team began to understand why the scrolls had been stored the way they were, and why their creators may never have expected anyone to read them at all. the practices the texts were meant to erase. With enough fragments aligned to form continuous passages, the team could finally see what kind of document they were dealing with. It was not teaching, it was a set of instructions. According to internal summaries, the material did not resemble scripture, teaching, or historical record. It was not reflective and it was not explanatory. It was operational. The language focused on actions to be carried out, conditions to be met, and outcomes to be avoided. Several reconstructed sections described bindings that had to be maintained over time. These were not abstract ideas. The passages listed quantities, timing, and materials with exactness. Linguists noted that the structure matched procedural writing rather than religious expression. According to preliminary interpretations, the text was concerned with control and continuation, not meaning or salvation. One pattern appeared again and again. Blood was referenced as a required component. In clearer fragments, the text separated animal blood from other offerings and treated it as a stabilizing substance. Cultural historians explained that in pre-Buddhist spirit traditions across the region, blood was sometimes used in rites meant to restrain or neutralize forces believed to be harmful. These practices were not acts of devotion, they were acts of necessity. More unsettling were several damaged lines that referred to what some scholars cautiously translated as life given willingly. The wording appeared alongside other materials and conditions, not prayers or metaphors. According to some interpretations, this could indicate the use of human blood. Researchers emphasized that this reading remains speculative. Still, the phrasing did not align with known animal sacrifice language from the same period, which deepened concern. What disturbed the team most was how these actions were described. The text did not celebrate them. It did not frame them as sacred duties or moral choices. It treated them as unavoidable measures. According to one internal report, the language suggested reluctance and burden, as if the writers believed these acts were necessary to prevent something worse. The fragments also pointed toward an ending. Multiple passages referred to sealing, closing, and final separation. Cultural historians believe this reflects a period of transition when older ritual systems were being deliberately shut down as new religious structures took hold. In this context, the scrolls appear to document practices that later societies no longer accepted, but could not simply erase. Nothing in the text invited continuation. There were no instructions for future practitioners. There were no calls to preserve or pass the knowledge on. Instead, the writing emphasized limits. Do not repeat, do not restore, do not reopen. According to some scholars, this suggests the scrolls were never meant to guide the future. They were meant to close the past. This framing explains why the texts were hidden rather than destroyed. Destroying them may have been seen as dangerous or incomplete. Preserving them openly was unacceptable. Sealing them deep within stone was the only solution. According to unverified accounts, this type of knowledge was considered too harmful to circulate and too consequential to erase entirely. By the end of the analysis, the purpose of the scrolls became clear. They were not meant to be studied, taught, or recovered. They were meant to be contained. The collapse of the temple did not reveal forbidden knowledge by accident. It exposed records that were intentionally buried so that no one, in any later age, would ever feel compelled to use them again. If you enjoyed watching this video, kindly like and subscribe to this channel.